Hey Roosters, and welcome back to another Star Wars Unlimited Leader Spotlight. In this series, we're going to look at a leader from the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game. We're going to talk about some cool cards that work with that leader within the set of the game. Before getting right into that, though, let's look at some rules that we want to talk about before we start doing that. So first off, let's look at the Spotlight disclaimer. These cards aren't confirmed to be the best cards with these leaders, just personal preferences for the most part. So that being said, if you have better options to cards you know work better with certain leaders or you think work better, please feel free to share them in the comment section below. And of course, in an attempt to keep these videos as short as possible, we're not going to go over every card that works well with the leader. So we're going to cut out some of the cards that are generically good and also some of the cards that maybe aren't that good at face value. That being said, let's get right into the leader spotlight. Leader we're going to be talking about is, and please excuse the pronunciation as usual, Iden Versio. I'm not really sure. I'll be honest, never heard of this character before. I do know that this character actually got a card in Star Wars Destiny, but I don't know what universe they're from. I believe it's Star Wars Battlefront, one of the newer games, but don't quote me on that. In fact, talk about it in the comment section below. Let me know exactly where this character comes from within the lore of Star Wars, so I can be exact. But I believe it's pronounced Iden Versio, right? And now, Iden Versio is a Vigilance and Villainy leader card, has the Imperial Land Trooper keywords, and has an action. If an enemy unit was defeated this field, goodness gracious. If an enemy unit was defeated this phase, hail 1 damage from your base. Of course, as an epic action, if you control 6 or more resources, you can deploy her as a leader unit. When you do, she becomes a 4/4 shielded unit. And when an enemy unit is defeated, you get to hail 1 damage from your base. So, obviously, taking a look at this lead at face value, you want to be doing two things. Making sure you get enemy units off the board, and making sure that you're able to heal up your base and take advantage of that fact. Obviously, you're not always going to just have your base at full health and just be impenetrable to damage through a bunch of healing, but that seems to be the game plan. You're trying to control the game with the ability to just control your opponent's field by knocking their units off the field, and then you want to control the game by also keeping yourself alive as long as possible. Or rather, maybe you can even use that just as a small benefit. But we're going to be talking about cards that do those two things for the leader card. So obviously this leader is a Vigilance leader. So let's take a quick look at some of the Vigilance cards you can play with this leader. And of course, some of the cool cards you can play if you want to play this leader on double Vigilance. So the first card we're going to look at in today's video is going to be the Security Complex. It's going to be a base, 25 health of course, but has a nice epic action, give a shield token to one of your non-leader units. Personally, I do think that for this leader, it's better to go for the generic 30 health, especially when you're healing up your base. More health means the more healing and the longer you're going to survive, but also because I don't think you necessarily need the extra shield token at face value. So what is one of the unit cards you can put in your deck? Death Trooper is a really good option. 3 cost, 3/3 when played. Deal 2 damage to a friendly ground unit and deal 2 damage to an enemy ground unit. This is going to allow you to knock your opponent's units off the field early game if they're weak enough, especially if they're weakened, or weaken them so they can be knocked off the field by other effects or other characters attacking and swinging in. But overall, it's going to be a way to chip out your opponent. Obviously, the 2 damage to a friendly ground unit is a bit of a negative, but at the same time, you're getting 2 damage for playing this guy, and you're getting a body off the field, so I think it might just be worth it. You can also play Del Miko, 3 cost, 3/3, restore 1, so that sort of falls into the idea that we're healing up our base, and each event an opponent plays costs 1 more. Just a little something to disrupt those the decks that love playing a bunch of different events and try to slow them down. A card that works super well with this leader is going to be Gideon Hask. 5 cost, 5/5. When an enemy unit is defeated, give an experience token to a friendly unit. And obviously, if you're doing a lot of this defeating shenanigans throughout the game, you could be racking up a decent amount of experience tokens to add on to your unit. Count Dooku is a beautiful big boy finisher type card, 7 cost, 5/4, shielded. When you play him, you can defeat a unit with 4 or less remaining HP. He's going to allow you to get that ability online, but also it's going to allow you to take out some of your opponent's bodies off the field, right? Then for the space units, you have the Avenger, 9 cost, 8/8. On when you play it or when you attack an opponent chooses a non-leader unit they control and they just defeat that unit. Obviously, they get the choice, so it's not exactly a perfect ability, but it's very powerful, and the card is super strong at 8/8 stat line as well. Look at some events you can play. Power of the Dark Side is a 3 cost event. It makes an opponent choose a unit they control, and you get to defeat that unit. Obviously, that sometimes they're just going to pick one of their weakest, maybe vanilla units they may have on the field, but at the same time, even though that may be the case, you still defeated a unit this turn, and so you're going to be able to activate your leader's ability. Then the Super Laser Blast is going to be 8 calls, defeat all units' ability. So if you're really far behind in the game, your opponent has a bigger field than you, and they're even threatening lethal damage that you know you won't be able to stop. You play this card down, and then you say, well, okay, I'm going to get another chance to sort of restart my board and try to get back into the game next round. And then you can also play Vigilance, which is going to be the innate event. It's going to be if you want to play this character on double Vigilance, which in my opinion is not the best way to play the character, but it's something you always have the choice to do, and there are some reasons to do so, this being one of them. 4 calls, choose 2 in any order, discard 2 from your opponent's, 6 cards from an opponent's deck, heal 5 damage from a base, defeat a unit with 3 or less remaining HP, or give a shield token to a unit. Obviously, when you're playing this leader, your 2 options here are probably going to be heal 5 damage from a base and defeat a unit with 6 or less remaining HP, but those other effects could possibly come in handy in some universe, right? Or in some matchups, in some instances, rather. Takedown is a beautiful card for this character. It's going to be a 4-cost card. It's going to allow you to defeat a unit with 5 less remaining HP. Early game, when you have 4 resources, that's going to be a ton of different units, and you're going to have a lot of different options to target with this and take them off the field. And then finally, we're going to look at not finally, but we're going to look at Vanquish as our final event. 5 cost, and it's just going to say defeat a non-leader unit. And then to move on here, I lied. There's another event. Repair 1 cost. Forgot I put this in here, but heal 3 damage from a unit or base. Obviously, if you're playing for that super heal at my base type game plan, then you might want to go for this card. And then finally, Devotion has the same idea. 2 costs, +1/+1. Attach unit gains restore 2. When they attack, they heal 2 damage from your base. And that's going to be it for the Vigilance cards that work super well at face value with this character, but also you can look at some cunning cards to play. Obviously, you have the option to play every different aspect of the main 4. Jeddah City is a nice option here, but it's not exactly going to help towards your game plan, so again, the basic base can work out just as well. So some units, you have the ISB Agent. 1 cost, 1/3. When played, you can reveal an event from your hand, and if you do, deal 1 damage to a unit. This could ping a weaker unit, or ping a unit to weaken them up for future abilities or attacks. But also, this could just knock a unit off the field if they're weak enough already or have a low enough HP. I really like the Bounty Hunter crew, 6 costs, 4/4, ambush, and then when you play the card, you can return an event from your discard pile to your hand, and if you're later in the game and you still need some of your control pieces, then obviously this is going to allow you to pick up those vanquishes or those takedowns that you might have in your deck, and if you think that maybe the game's really not going in your favor and your opponent's already threatening lethal, or you think they will be in the future, you can play this guy down, ambush attack with them, pick up a super laser blast from your discard pile, and blast the entire board. Maybe not in the future turns you can blast the entire board. Probably after paying 6 costs to play this guy in the field or this cardinal in the field, you're not going to be able to go right into a super laser blast. But I mean, it's a possibility to think about if you feel whatever you may need in the instant, it can get you one of those events. And then obviously the 7th Fleet Defenders, some space units, 3 costs, 3/2 shielded, just a good unit in my opinion. The Chimera, 8 cost, 8/7 shielded, and on attack you name a card. Your opponent reveals their hand and discards a card with that name from it. If you're really pressed about a certain ability that they may have access to, something that you think may really shut your entire deck down, or rather shut your current board state down, maybe that would be a super laser blast, maybe you're really far ahead and you don't want them to make a comeback like that, then you can name whatever card you're really pressed about and get rid of it. There are a bunch of cards in Swords Unlimited that kind of do the same thing, so if you're afraid of a certain type of card and your opponent plays multiple things that do the same thing, such as if you're afraid of a Vanquish or a takedown and they have a Vanquish in their hand and you say takedown, and even if they get rid of the takedown, they still have the Vanquish, it could be, sometimes it cannot actually save you, but sometimes it could make a difference, and especially if you know what your opponent's playing and what you're really afraid of in a certain situation or matchup. I had no choice. An interesting card, 7 cost. Choose up to 2 non-leader units. An opponent chooses one of those units, return that unit to its owner's hand, and put the other on the bottom of its owner's deck. Obviously, this is not necessarily defeating units, but it's taking them off the field and it's giving you space to open up and make your moves that you need to make. And then you, of course, have a surprise strike. Now, this is a bit of a generic event, but it's going to give your characters +3 attack on attack, and that could make the difference between swinging and knocking off the unit to activate your leader's ability and not doing so. Snapshot reflexes in one cost +1/+1. When you play it, you can attack with the attached unit. Generically good cards can allow you to swing in, and sometimes even swing in without your opponent thinking you'd be able to. About I'm playing your card. Okay, your opponent's like, okay, what's he gonna do? You attach this, you swing in with +1 attack essentially, and sometimes your opponent's just not gonna see it coming, and you can catch them off guard, and you can make some damage, deal some damage that way that maybe they thought they had time to prepare for. On the command symbol, which is probably one of the best ways to play this leader, you have some options of bases. Again, I think the generic base is completely fine, or in fact better, but of course, if you need that extra ability and you're playing throughout the games, you realize that maybe at some point you really need to just play a unit at 6 cost, that is 6 cost or less, from your hand and give it ambush. This phase to just deal some extra damage. It's perfectly justifiable to add that one into your deck. First card we're looking at today is going to be Rook. 5 cost 3/6 shielded, and when this unit deals combat damage to a non-leader unit while attacking, you could defeat that unit. It's pretty obvious why we're putting this in his deck. Good HP and the ability to just knock units off the field regardless of their power. And then, of course, you have Colonel Yularen, which sort of looks at the other half of the deck. 2 cost, 2/3. When you play a green unit, a command unit, you get to heal damage from your base. And essentially, it also connects to this unit. So when you play him, you get to heal 1 damage from your base. And then when you play command units in the future, you get to heal more damage from your base. Cool card overall, especially if you're healing up. Speaking of healing up, we have the Consortium Star Viper. It's going to be a 3 cost, 3/3. When you have the initiative, this unit's going to gain Restore 2. You're not always going to have the initiative, and sometimes you may never get the initiative, but ultimately you probably will, especially if you really need to at some point in the game, and so this card can allow you to heal up for a cheap price. Overwhelming Barrage is going to be a cool event you can play. 5 cost. Give a friendly unit +2/+2 for this phase, and then it deals damage to equal to its power divided among. It's divided as you choose among any number of other units. This is a beautiful ability in this deck because you can buff a unit you have on the field and say, well, I'm just gonna take off essentially an opponent's unit by dealing that much damage to them. And if it ever happens to be the case that you would have to deal too much damage, say you have the opponent has a 1 HP unit on the field, you can just say I'll deal 1 damage to him and then 4 damage to the other guy, right? So it's a really cool ability in this deck. You can also play Strike 2, which kind of essentially does the same thing. It just doesn't really give that staff boost and doesn't allow you to divide the damage. 3 cost Strike 2, a friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to an enemy unit. So it's sort of the same idea. I'm going to sort of burn my opponent, quote unquote. And then finally, you can play Traitorous, which is an interesting card in general, but it's a 5 cost +0/+0 upgrade. But when this upgrade comes into play, it can be attached to a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less, and you get to take control of that unit. Then when this upgrade becomes unattached from a unit, that unit owners take control of it. Now, if your opponent ever discards this upgrade, they're going to get their card back, but essentially you can use your own units against them to defeat their own units or defeat this unit that you took control of. And it's a really interesting card to play in a deck like this, especially if we're going for a really control sort of themed deck here. And that's going to be command, but we have, I believe, one last main aspect to take a look at, and that's going to be aggression. So aggression, what are some of the cards you can play? Obviously, you can play the generic base. Actually, I think Tarkentown's a pretty good option here. Just being able to tail damage to a 3 damage to a non-leader unit at any point if you don't really have anything else to say during that particular phase or round. Just to be able to knock out some weaker units or soften them up is actually really good in this deck. Some units you probably want to play is First Legion Stormtrooper, Snowtrooper, 2 cost, 2/3. While attacking a damaged unit, this unit gets +2 damage and Overwhelm. So obviously, if your opponent, you could soften up your enemy's units with, say, Tarkentown, and then you can come in with this guy, swing in for some extra damage if you need that extra damage to kill them. And then also, if your opponent has a really weak unit, you can swing in there if they're damaged and weakened, knock them off the field and deal some extra damage to their base. Absolutely beautiful. You also play the Seventh Sister, 5 cost, 3/6 Saboteur. When this unit deals combat damage to an opponent's base, you can deal 3 damage to a ground unit that opponent controls. That can sometimes just knock their ground unit off the field, depending on how powerful it is. Sort of the same idea as some of the other abilities that we talked about. Playing the Ruthless Raiders as a space unit, 6 cost, 4/6. When played, when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. Absolutely beautiful. Soften up some units, deal some burn damage to the base. Imperial Interceptor, 4 cost, 3/2. When played, deal 3 damage to a space unit. Same idea as a lot of the other cards we're talking about. Just trying to take those units off the field through various effects. 2 cost Force Choke. If you have a Force unit, it's going to cost 1 less to play, but you might not always, especially if you're just playing Dooku as one of your only Force units. But you also have the Inquisitors you can play into your deck, like the 7th Sister. So you're going to be able to deal 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit, and a lot of early game non-vehicle units that just pop, takes them right off the field. They're going to be gone, right? And then the unit controller does get to draw a card, which is a bit of a downside, but sometimes that card cannot mean anything, especially if they're already tapped out. But of course, you could open yourself up to some plays that they can make it in the future. But it is what it is, because essentially you're going to be taking a lot of different units off the field with this ability. And if you happen to have an Inquisitor on the field or a different Force unit, it's only going to be a 1 cost too. In contrast, we have Open Fire, which is going to be a 3 cost event tactic. Deal 4 damage to a unit, very straightforward. A lot of units are going to be able to just be taken off the field with this ability. Not all of them, but there's a decent chunk, especially some of those weaker space, early game space units are really fragile. And so you'll be able to take them off the field with that ability. Infiltrator skill, a 1 cost 2/2. This attached unit gains Saboteur. This is a really important upgrade to have in this deck if you're playing aggression, because a lot of times your opponent's going to have shields on their characters, and they're going to try to say, well, you're not burn damaging me. So I'm not going to take that extra damage. I'm not taking 3 damage. I'm taking essentially 0. I'm taking 1 damage. That 1 shield is going away, right? And be able to ignore shield is very important. Now, obviously, you're playing a lot of just defeat your opponent's units cards that you have in the Vigilance blue symbol. Then Saboteur won't always matter, because you're just taking them off the field regardless. They're not being protected from Vanquish or Takedown. But in a lot of situations, that's not going to be the case. And sometimes you're going to look to do some burn damage if you're playing this person, your leader, you're playing Versio on aggression. This is going to be what you're going to be looking to do. And that's going to be it for all the main aspects. But of course, villainy is an aspect too, by all means. And there's a couple of cards, a bunch of cards that work well. I'm just going to look at over a couple of them with this leader. Snow Trooper Lieutenant, 2 costs, 2/2. When played, you can attack with another unit. If it's appearing, the unit gets +2 attack. Absolutely beautiful, because it's going to allow you to deal some extra damage this turn. It's going to allow you to essentially take 2 actions in one and get some extra damage for your troubles. Hopefully take an opponent unit off the field, or just, swing in for maybe game, who knows. TIE Advance is going to be a 4 cost unit, 3/2. When played, give 2 experience tokens to another friendly Imperial unit. There a lot of your cards in this deck are be Imperial. A lot of villainous cards are Imperial, so those abilities can help you out a lot. And then of course, finally, I Am Your Father, 3 cost. You're going to allow you to deal 7 damage to any unit. Of course, your opponent's that unit's controller can say no, and if they do, you get to draw 3 cards. But the chance of them doing that doesn't really matter, because either way, it's a very powerful effect. 7 damage to an enemy unit and 3 cards in hand are both really good effects. Obviously, if you really need the 7 damage, your opponent denying you that 7 damage can feel bad at times. But I think a lot of people are going to feel happy with 3 extra cards in their hand. So that's going to be all for today's video. Today's video we looked at, and again, excuse the pronunciation of the name, we looked at Iden Versio, which is going to be a Vigilance villainy unit. You want to be dealing some damage to your opponent's units. You want to take them off the field through various effects, and then you want to heal up your base and sort of just control the game, control your opponent's board state, control your base's health, and make it so that they feel they can't really do anything. Maybe not one of the most fun strategies to play against in all of card games, but definitely something that is worth checking out. Definitely one of the more popular decks in the game, and definitely somebody that you have the unlimited abilities to explore and play around with. That's going to be all for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys check out some other Star Wars Unlimited spotlights that we've done on the channel. And then, of course, subscribe if you want to see more in the future, because we have a couple more days left, a week left to Star Wars Unlimited goodness, leader spotlights to go through. And I hope to see you guys there for them. Well, that's going to be all for now, but if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys go ahead and watch some of our other videos that we've made on this channel. Also, give this video a like if you thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. And I hope to see you guys back at the Roost.